Hi everyone, today's session is the assignment discussion session. My name is Shazia Khan and the unit we'll be doing the assignment guidance on is 3.29 legal terminology and communication. Before we go into the assignment discussion, I just want to summarise the learning outcomes that we've done so far to get to this point. So we've done learning outcome 1, which we looked at how organisations work in the legal sector communities. We looked at what communication was. We looked at the different types of communication models, and we looked at the benefits of informal and formal communication and principles of effective communication. So we looked at what communication was, again, legal communication and the importance of legal communication within the legal field. We looked at verbal communication, advantages and disadvantages of that, and written communication. We also looked at non-verbal communication. We looked at, this is all in learning outcome 1, we looked at the characteristics of verbal communication. We also looked at non-verbal communication. We looked at the importance of non-verbal communication. So words, body language, the tone of your voice. We then went on to look at informal and formal communication systems. We looked at great wine communication, and then we went on to look at effective communication and then barriers to communication as well, such as language barriers, physical, psychological, and cultural barriers. We then went on to learning outcome 2, which was to be able to present information in a legal context orally. We started off by looking at the different styles and methods of oral communication for different audiences. We looked at the legal context orally, how you present information. We looked at the issue in regards to what oral communication is, and that it can either be formal or informal. We looked at the importance of oral communication, types of oral communication, which can be things like face-to-face, speeches, presentations, discussion groups. We also looked at things like the advantages and disadvantages of oral communication, and we looked at the role of argumentation in law, why it's so important that we have the skill of argumentation in law. We also looked at the logical approach, the rhetorical approach with reference to quotes by James Perelmans. We also looked at the audience analysis of oral communication and the important part in regards to the legal side of it. We looked at the 4 Ps in legal argument: planning, practice, preparation, and performance. We then went on to look at legal learning outcome 3, which was to be able to communicate legal information in writing. And we looked at the different styles and methods. We looked at what legal communication is. We looked at establishing the functions of legal language and to be able to communicate in the legal profession. Also, universal features of legal language, professional legal communication such as emails and minutes of meetings, drafting client care letters. We looked at the importance with the Solicitors Regulation Authority in regards to client care letters, and we looked at the importance of drafting letters and legal documentation. So now we're going to go on to the assignment guidance in regards to learning outcome 1, 2, and 3, and do the assignment. Thank you. So learning outcomes here is to know, I've just been through each one. Learning outcome 1, know how organisations working in the legal sector communicate. Learning outcome 2, be able to present information in a legal context orally. And learning outcome 3, be able to communicate legal information in writing. Know how organisations working in the legal sector communicate. So firstly, we need to look at one of the questions, which is to describe communication models and systems used in organisations working in the legal sector. So we need to first provide a brief introduction to communication used in organisations and why communication is important with reference to examples. So we need to identify that. Then we need to look at the difference between described verbal and non-verbal communication. And for this, when we look at verbal and non-verbal communication skills, we need to look at examples. So it could be things like non-verbal communication, could be body language, tone of voice, facial expressions. So we need to look at giving examples. For example, when you meet someone and hear them speak, you from your judgment about their background and likely level of ability and understanding, this may well change what you say. If you hear a foreign accent, for example, you might decide that you need to use simple language. You might also realize that you will need to listen more carefully to ensure that they understand what you are saying. So these are some kind of examples of verbal and non-verbal communication. And the word count for this section in regards to describing communication models and systems is 350 to 450 words. The next one is to describe the methods used and benefits of both informal and formal communication. So here you will be looking at what formal and informal communication is. You will be briefly description on both communication. So briefly describe what formal communication is and what informal communication is. You need to look at the types of formal and informal communication. You need to go on to look at the benefits of formal and informal communication. And you need to look at the limitations of formal and informal communication. And we went through the limitations on learning outcome 1 in regards to the advantages and disadvantages. And the word count for this section is 350 to 450 words. So you need to outline the principles of effective communication. You need to briefly explain characteristics of effective communication. You need to explain the principles of effective communication, use the 7C models. We looked at the 7C model in learning outcome 1 in regards to effective communication and identified what they were in regards to giving examples. So you need to look at STEM in regards to looking at the 7Cs and why they are so important in communication. You also need to look at discussing the benefits and barriers to effective communication. And barriers could be things like, language barriers, psychological barriers, physical barriers, and cultural barriers. And you need to talk about them. When you talk about each one, you could look at the fact that, language may be an issue for them to understand certain things. So, from different cultures, people understand things differently. And also things like, psychological barriers, might be disability, might be lack of interest. The 7Cs, few examples on that. The 7Cs you need to look at are clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. And all these are on learning outcome 1. You need to do this in 350 to 450 words. You need to explain how technology is used for different types of communication. So you explain the different technology medium used for legal communication, such as email, social media, audio, video conferencing, and others. And you need to discuss the benefits and limitations of each medium. So if you talk about emails, explain the benefits and the limitations, so disadvantages and disadvantages of each one. And that would be in this section for this question, it is 350 to 450 words. Then you need to look at the barriers to effective communication. So you need to look at physical barriers, organizational barriers, which I've explained earlier, cultural barriers and language barriers. Explain how these barriers can all be overcome. So, you know, you need to identify if there were any language barriers, what would you do to try to overcome this barrier? Maybe speak slowly, maybe get an interpreter, maybe speak, clearly and use, basic English and basic jargon for the person. And the word count for this section is 350 to 450 words. Propose solutions to the barriers to effective communication. Now, this is for merit criteria. So once you've done your past criteria, if you want to get additional activities for merit criteria, you need to look at proposing solutions to barriers to effective communication. So you need to, for a merit criteria, you need to present solutions to barriers to effective communication. You need to critically evaluate each solution and provide example for each of the proposed solutions. And the word count for this section is 400 to 500 words. Analyze the effectiveness of communication models and systems used in a specific organization in the legal sector. And this is for distinction criteria. So to gain a distinction, you need to do the following. Okay, so you need to look at selecting a legal firm or a corporate legal department in an organization. So it could be something like maybe ASDA's legal department, Morrison's legal department, or a law firm. And you need to analyze the effectiveness of communication models and systems in the organizations. So look at the models that they are using and whether they are effective within that organization. You need to explain how it helps in achieving the organization's objectives. And the word count for this section is again 400 to 500 words. And this is an additional extension activity that you could gain a distinction from if you complete this activity. So that would be analyze the effectiveness of communication models and systems used in a specific organization in the legal sector. Evaluate how different uses of technology can enhance or detract from good communication in the legal profession. Again, this is for a distinction criteria. So if you want to get the additional distinction mark, you would need to do this for this question. You need to identify 3 or 4 technology media used for communication in legal profession. You need to evaluate the use of each of their mediums. So you need to discuss the benefits and limitations of that. You need to explain how each technology medium helps in enhancing communication within the legal profession. So whether there's a need for these mediums and how they work within a legal profession and how they help in enhancing communication skills within that profession. And the word count for this section is 400 to 500 words. So the next one is be able to present information in a legal context orally. So here the question is, use different styles and methods of oral communication for different audiences. So you need to look at discussing how oral communication is used in organizations. You need to discuss the types of oral communication. Use theoretical models and examples wherever necessary. So the types of oral communication within an organization, so such as face-to-face, discussions, speeches, presentations. You need to be looking at them and use theoretical models and examples. It could be things like, your telephone calls. So any types of oral communication, use theoretical models and example if wherever necessary. You need to also discuss the benefits and limitations of oral communication. So look at if there's any benefits or any disadvantages, advantages of oral communication. And to get, in regards to this, you would need to look at things like, some advantages could be that it is quick feedback, it's saving money, it's effective for all, more reliable. Some of the limitations and the disadvantages that it could be, there's no legal validity, confused speech, distortion of meaning, sometimes risk of leak of secret information. So you need to go through the diagram we went through on learning outcome to give you some benefits and limitations of oral communication. The word count for this section is 350 to 450 words. Then you need to present information in a legal context orally in a formal situation using correct legal terminology. So here you need to discuss how information can be presented in organizations using legal terminology. You will use examples wherever applicable. And here again, the word count for this section of the assignment is 350 to 450 words. And you need to, the next element is to respond to questions arising from presentation of information. So you need to look at discussing the role of argumentation in law, why it's so important in law, and why there's a need for it. You need to explain how response to legal documentation is carried out. So using examples wherever possible. So client cares, drafting documents. You need to look at explaining how response to legal documentation is carried out with examples. And the word count for this section is 350 to 450 words. So for a distinction criteria and for the additional extension activities to gain a distinction, you need to look at manage and facilitate a question and answer session to demonstrate subject knowledge, communication skills. So you need to speak with your learning coordinator to facilitate a session. In the session, you need to demonstrate how effectively you can communicate using legal terminologies. You need to look at how you can demonstrate verbal and non-verbal communication skills. So this is for the extension activity to gain the distinction. You need to pick a recent legal topic and provide your opinion on that topic. So it could be anything, the fact that, new law might have come in. It could be the fact that, there's a new case coming on abortion, or the law relating to, mobile phones, or any new law coming in regards to, domestic violence, anything like that. And then you need to provide your opinion on that. And this would be, word count for this section would be 400 to 500 words. And this is for the distinction criteria. The next one is to be able to communicate legal information in writing. Here you need to look at communicating legal information in writing using appropriate terminology, styles, and methods. So you need to study and explain the different legal styles and methods. You need to use formal structure for preparation of a draft legal document by using Microsoft Word. So contents, footnotes, and proper referencing, which is the Harvard referencing system. You need to have the word count for this section as 350 to 450 words. General guidelines. Merit distinction. Make sure there's sufficient evidence of critical analysis. So critique the arguments supported by academic literature. So make sure that if you take anything from a book or any source from internet, make sure you use the Harvard system of referencing to actually reference your work. Okay, it shows that you have evidence where you've got the work from. Otherwise, it does identify as plagiarism. Ensure you include relevant theoretical models and examples. Yes, so if you have any theoretical models, make sure you use them, and any sources that you've used, reference them, and any examples that you've used, make sure you reference them. Use peer-reviewed journals for supporting or critique of the topic at hand. At least 20 high-quality journal references. Avoid low-quality sources such as blogs, and make sure you reference everything you use, and make sure you use good sources and reliable sources and valid sources, because you have to explain theoretical models and it needs to be supported by literature. Useful tips. So make sure you read the tasks carefully. And make sure you focus on the details and what the task is asking you. Do not go away from that because you have your word limits. Make sure you look and focus on what you are being asked. So, if you are being asked about anything in regards to, explain what communication is, that's what you need to explain. You don't need to go into disadvantages, advantages. Now, then when you are asked about advantages and limitations, then you need to go into that. So you need to focus on detail, focus on what you are being asked, and identify the area that you need to concentrate on. Command words that you need to be take into account. Explain, define, describe is normally 70 to 100 words. Assess, examine, clarify, analyze, 100 to 125 words. Compare, contrast, critically analyze, 150 to 200 words. So make sure you look at the command words. Make sure you focus on the task carefully. If you want to do the extension task to gain a merit or distinction, make sure you answer them in regards to what they are asking you and not go off point. Okay. The system, again, I've said that is the Harvard referencing system that you will use, and that is the system that is used throughout UK Varsity. So reference needs to be in Harvard. So here you will have, for example, the author and the date and style together. Okay, for example, Johnson and Woods 2011, that would be the main text. Okay, so if you're writing an essay and you're writing about an example would be about effective speaking, you could say effective speaking involves 3 main areas: the words you choose, how you say them, and how you reinforce them with other non-verbal communication. You would reference this from the book, maybe Smith 2022, and put it in brackets in the main text in the assignment. Okay, then in the full citation is in the reference or the bibliography at the back. Then you would put the full citation of that book, Smith 2022, referencing skills, publication, 2nd edition, Peacock, London. Okay, so that would be in the full citation at the end. And for this, you could use the Harvard referencing generators that are available online. So you've got things like site.com, and you've got things like Neil's Toolbox that will help you put the references together. So if you struggle with the dots and the commas, this will help you. But for the main text, when you're doing the assignment, the body of the text, you need to put in the author and the date. Okay, and then the full citation will go in the referencing. Also, a really important thing to do is when you are doing your assignment and you've been given the word count like you have in the different areas that we've looked at, learning outcome 1, 2, and 3, stick to them word count. Do not go over the word count, and keep a check on your word count all the time. Okay, so now we finished this session. Okay, and please make sure you take into account all the details we've gone through. So the useful tips is quite a good thing to read a couple of times and focus on it. So focus on your tasks, your command words, and look at your Harvard referencing and keep a check on it. Make sure you answer the questions, the tasks that you want to do. And if you want to do the additional extension tasks, then the criteria is there for the merit and distinction. Okay, so thank you for your patience, and thank you for attending today's session. And we have now finished the session.